Chapter 1. The Summons. The portal from murk dusk opened onto smooth obsidian, Concordia's arrival chamber, calm and carefully maintained. Shade stepped through first, his form coalescing from shadow into something that resembled solid. Behind him, Katrina emerged with predator grace, her silver katana moonshadow catching the light as it rested across her back. The rune etchings along its blade, etched to cut through shadow and supernatural alike, gleamed faintly. At her side, steel tungsten darts hung in a bandolier across her chest, each one etched with its own set of glyphs. Precision weapons. Supernatural killer weapons. The chamber was empty except for two of Rose's locals. Operatives, not soldiers. They nodded without ceremony. This was routine. Urgent, but routine. "Rose is expecting you in the study," one said. "House of Night Whispers is already standing by for the portal. They know the timeline. No additional words. No questions. These were people trained to recognize when conversation was a luxury. Concordia beyond the chamber was different from how Shade remembered it. The markets were booming. Traders calling wares. Merchants stacking goods. The city thrumming with the kind of prosperity that came after winning a war. Children played in the streets. Families moved through the evening with the ease of people who believed tomorrow would be kind. But there was purpose underneath the prosperity. Military precision hiding behind normalcy. Rose had rebuilt Concordia not just as a city, but as a stronghold. They moved through streets that had become familiar through repetition, past Lady Vess's territories, marked by subtle sigils on doorways, past Rose's various operational centres. The older sections of Concordia rose before them, the pre-war architecture that had survived and been reinforced. The House of Silver Mirrors was exactly as Shade had last seen it, ancient, humming with protective enchantments, mirrors embedded everywhere, scrying points, surveillance nodes, communication hubs. But there was something else about it now, a readiness that spoke of something worse than normal threat assessment. The study was on the third level, accessed through corridors that twisted in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. Rose's locals guarded the entrance, serious people with serious eyes. Shade and Katrina entered without being announced. The study was warm, lit by firelight from a hearth that burned with flames too controlled to be natural. Books lined the walls, but these were tactical texts, intelligence reports, maps, the library of someone who'd spent lifetimes learning how to survive. Clara stood before the central table. Her hair was pulled back, her expression the careful neutral of a commander about to ask for something she knew people wouldn't want to give. Darren occupied a chair near the wall, arms crossed, his usual humour replaced with something that looked like grim certainty, which meant the situation was bad. Lyra stood in the corner, still as carved stone, her sharp eyes tracking everyone, who entered with the focus of a soldier whose job was preventing surprises. Omega lay on a rug near the fire, approximately 180 pounds of lean muscle and predator focus, his golden eyes fixed on Shade and Katrina for a moment, assessing, acknowledging the scent of umbranite shadow on them, before he returned to watching the room. Eli stood at the tactical display, her silver hair pulled back, her bracer gloves glowing faintly as she reviewed data streams. When Shade and Katrina entered, she looked up, her expression all business. And Rose stood at the window overlooking Concordia's evening streets. She turned as Shade and Katrina entered. No surprise on her face, she'd been expecting them. But there was something else. Recognition of weight. Recognition of what was being asked. The 20-foot bullwhip hung coiled at her side, its rune-etched length reflecting firelight. Her armour, fire-kissed, enchanted to withstand temperatures that would melt normal steel, caught the light in patterns that suggested recent use. And there, suspended in the air near her shoulder, hung the flame-heart crystal. It was alive. That was the only word for it. The artifact pulsed with inner light, molten red core surrounded by spiraling veins of brilliant orange and gold that moved like embers frozen in time. Heat radiated from it, not comforting but intense, almost suffocating. The kind of heat that tested worthiness. When Rose had bound with that crystal, something had changed in her. The fire magic she wielded now carried its hues, molten red and gold, and moved with an almost sentient intensity. "Thank you for coming," Clara said. Not a greeting, a statement of fact, and beneath it, acknowledgement of the cost. "We have a problem. One that requires people who understand shadow. And I need to know right now if you're willing to walk into something that might not have a clean ending." Shade's silver eyes moved to the tactical display on the table. Maps of murk dusk, maps of Concordia, and maps of something else. A realm shown only in fragmentary detail, its edges wavering as if the scrying couldn't quite hold focus. "Umbral." "What happened?" Katrina asked. Rose spoke. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd lived long enough to understand finality. Syrien's child, her biological child, was sent to Umbral beforehand, as insurance, as a safeguard. Rose paused. Then Syrien went alone to confront Gunnar, to trap him. Aeliana was there. Clara continued quietly. Aeliana tore through her. We got reports of the fight. Syrien barely escaped with her life, severely wounded, bleeding out, but alive. She made it to Umbral where her child was already waiting. Eli looked up from the tactical display. "We don't know her exact condition now. We don't know if she's stable, recovering, or dying. We only know she disappeared into that realm, and we haven't had any intelligence since." Katrina's hand moved to one of her tungsten darts. "So the child is already there. This wasn't a rescue extraction. This was planned." "Yes," Rose said. "Syrien secured her child first, then went after Gunnar. And now she's in Umbral with him. We need to know her status, what she intends, and whether she's still a threat, or just trying to survive." Clara moved to the window, looking out at Concordia's lights. "We can't send a full team. Umbral consumes what doesn't belong. Light-based magic reads as invasion. Our standard operatives would be flagged before they took their second step. But people born of shadow, people who understand twilight and darkness, they move through those spaces differently." She turned back to face them. "We need you three. Shade, Katrina, and Rose. You'll infiltrate Umbral, find the child, find Syrien, determine what condition she's in. And if possible," that pause was heavy, "extract the child before she recovers or completes whatever she's planning." Rose stepped forward. "There's a secondary objective, one that comes with consequences," Eli explained. "The House of Night Whispers is providing the portal access. In exchange, they want something that's in Umbral. An archive. Ancient knowledge about portals, about the realms themselves. Information that Black Dawn has been guarding carefully." Katrina's eyes narrowed. "So we're not just extracting a child. We're stealing from Black Dawn." "We're retrieving something that shouldn't belong to them in the first place," Rose corrected. "But yes. The archive is non-negotiable. Lucian won't open the portal without a commitment to retrieve it." Darren leaned forward. "And if you can't find it?" "Then the House of Night Whispers provides minimal support," Clara said flatly. "Which means extraction becomes significantly harder. If you find the archive, you bring it back. That's the deal." Eli added, "Lucienne wasn't specific about what's in it. Just that it exists, Black Dawn guards it, and it could change everything about dimensional magic." His words. Shade studied the tactical display. "So we're looking for two objectives in a realm we barely understand, with limited time and no intel on current threats." "Correct," Clara said. "Which is why I need to know right now if you can do this. Not retrieve the child, not survive Umbral, but retrieve the child and the archive." Eli's voice cut through clearly from her position at the tactical display. "House of Night Whispers is opening a portal. They're specialists in that kind of work, shadow magic, twilight passages. The connection will be unstable. You'll have a window, 12 hours, maybe less. After that, the portal closes and we can't reopen it until midnight the following day. If you're not through by then, you stay in Umbral. Darren finally spoke and his tone was all business. And the child? What's the extraction plan if Syrien refuses? Clara looked at Rose. We do what we have to do, Rose said quietly. But the priority is intelligence. We need to know what Syrien is up to. Because if she's not just wounded, if she's recovering, then we're facing something worse than we thought. Shade studied the maps. Red markers clustered around locations only Rose would recognize. Why us, specifically? Because Katrina understands Umbranite shadow, Clara said. Because Shade has centuries of tactical experience in hostile environments. And because Rose was born there, she knows how to survive it. Clara met their eyes. And because I can't order this, I won't order this. This is volunteer only. The silence that followed was the silence of people understanding what they were being asked. Katrina's grip on her katana's hilt tightened. We go in blind on Syrien's status. We go in with Rose's knowledge, Clara corrected, which is considerable, but yes, limited. You'll be working with incomplete intel, but it's all we have. Rose stepped forward. I know Umbral. I know how to move through it. I know which passages are safe and which ones feed on intrusion. I can guide you to the likely locations where Syrien would hole up. She paused. But I can't guarantee we'll survive it. The realm has been getting worse since I left. Darker. Hungrier. Shade looked at Katrina. No words passed between them. They'd been training together long enough that eye contact was sufficient. Katrina nodded once. Shade turned back to Clara. Extract the child. Retrieve the archive. Both or nothing. Both or nothing, Clara confirmed. When do we leave? 6 hours, Clara said. House of Night Whispers will open the portal at midnight. After that, you're gone. She moved to a locked chest beside the fireplace. When she opened it, the air seemed to get colder. Inside lay several items. First, cloaking charges, small crystalline devices etched with shadow runes. Eli designed these. They'll mask your magical signature for approximately 3 minutes per charge. You've got 12 of them. Use them wisely. Second, EMP grenades, sleek devices that hummed faintly with unstable energy. These are specifically calibrated for Black Dawn rifle technology. When they detonate, the electromagnetic pulse will overload any disruption rifle within 50 meters. The rifles explode, so be careful. Once you're in, Clara said, you're on your own. We can't follow. We can't help. All we can do is wait for the midnight window. If you make it back, we're ready. If you don't, she didn't finish. She didn't need to. Eli nodded from her position at the display. The portal location is in House of Night Whispers' deep chamber. They'll guide you there at 11:45 p.m. Don't be late. The window doesn't stay open. Darren stood. You want backup? I can have a strike team ready to go in after you if extraction becomes necessary. No, Clara said flatly. If they can't get out, a strike team just becomes additional casualties. We've learned that lesson. Omega rose from his position near the fire. His eyes locked on Shade and Katrina. He wanted to come. The bond between Dire Wolf and Pack ran deep. But Clara placed a hand on his massive head. You stay, she said quietly. We need you here, in case something follows them out. Shade picked up the cloaking charges. Each one was the size of a hockey puck, but they pulsed with barely contained power. The flameheart crystal around her neck flared, responding to her readiness, her determination. One more thing, Clara said. They all turned back to her. If you encounter Syrien, if she's recovered, you make the call. Save the child if you can. But don't die trying. The Pack needs you alive more than it needs one child, no matter how important that child is. It was a cold calculus, but it was the calculus of war. Understood, Shade said. Then get ready, Clara said. House of Night Whispers will send someone for you at 11:30. After that, you go into Umbral. She turned back to the window, looking out at Concordia's lights. Behind her, the tactical displays continued to pulse with markers, unknown threats, uncertain situations, all of it waiting in a realm that had learned to consume. Shade, Katrina, and Rose moved toward the door. As they reached it, Clara spoke one final time, her voice quiet but absolute. "Come back alive." That's an order. They didn't answer. They didn't need to. 3 shadows walked out into Concordia's evening, knowing that before midnight, they'd be walking into nightmare. Chapter 2. The Descent. The House of Night Whispers didn't announce itself. You didn't find it. It found you. The alley in Concordia's old quarter looked like every other forgotten corner. Crumbling brick, narrow passage, the kind of place where light died and stayed dead. Shade, Katrina, and Rose stood before what appeared to be an ordinary wall of weathered stone. Rose approached without hesitation. She knocked, pattern, precise, deliberate. For a moment, nothing. Then the walls shimmered, heat haze illusion falling away. A doorway appeared, revealing entrance that hadn't been there moments before. Beyond it, candlelit corridors twisted in directions that seemed impossible. Whispers echoed from multiple directions, though no one was visible. Shade checked his chronometer. 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes before the scheduled descent. They stepped through. The interior defied the modest exterior. The House of Night Whispers existed in layers, some visible, some suggested. The air itself felt different here, older, heavy with the weight of secrets held and traded over centuries. Every wall hummed faintly with protective enchantments, and the silence had a quality that felt deliberate, intentional. A figure emerged from shadow, tall, elegant, with the bearing of someone who'd been listening to secrets for longer than most people had been alive. Shade, Katrina, Rose. Lucien inclined his head with perfect courtesy, his violet eyes moving across each of them with calculated interest. "I trust the preparations in Concordia went smoothly." "As smoothly as they could," Rose said, her voice steady. "The mission parameters are understood. Extract the child, retrieve the archive. Both objectives." Lucien's smile was thin, sharp as a blade. "Directness. I appreciate that. It suggests you understand the gravity of what you're about to undertake." His gaze lingered on Rose's bullwhip, her fire-kissed armor, the flame-heart crystal pulsing faintly at her throat. "And the preparation. Good. Umbral respects power that's been hardened in flame." He gestured to a corridor that descended deeper into the house's structure. "The portal chamber is this way. We don't have much time. The window is narrow." They followed him through passages that twisted in ways that had nothing to do with physical space. Shade's tactical mind tracked directions anyway, cataloguing turns and intersections, even though he knew the information would be useless. The House of Night Whispers didn't allow itself to be mapped. That was the point. Lucien walked with the ease of someone moving through their own domain. His silver hair caught candlelight as he moved, and his voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of authority that came from knowing everyone's secrets and choosing which ones to weaponize. "You understand what you're walking into?" he asked, not turning around. The question wasn't really a question. "A realm that consumes what doesn't belong," Katrina said. "Darkness that hunts intruders. Syrien, severely wounded, in an unknown location with her child." "And something older," Lucien added. "Something that was old before Umbral became Umbral. The archive Black Dawn has been protecting. It's not just information, it's dangerous information. The kind that rewrites how people understand the fundamental architecture of realms themselves." He descended a final set of stairs. The air grew colder, heavier. Magical pressure began to build. "Black Dawn didn't guard it because it was valuable," Lucien continued. "They guarded it because they were afraid of what would happen if it was ever lost. Or found. Or read by the wrong people." Rose spoke quietly. "You're saying we're not just retrieving knowledge. We're retrieving something that could destabilize the existing power structure." I'm saying, Lucien replied, reaching a sealed door of dark wood reinforced with silver thread, that information is only dangerous in the right hands. In the wrong hands, it's just another weapon waiting to be picked up. He placed his palm against the door. Wards flared, silver light, ancient runes, layers of protection that took 3 full seconds to cycle through recognition, assessment, and authorization. The door opened silently. Beyond it lay the portal chamber. The space was vast, circular, carved from obsidian that seemed to drink light rather than reflect it. At its centre, a massive ritual circle had been etched into the floor, runes spiralling outward in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The air above the circle shimmered, and that shimmer was beginning to intensify. 12 hours, Lucien said, moving to the circle's edge. Possibly less. Once you step through, the portal will seal. We can reopen it, but not until midnight tomorrow. If you're not back by then, we stay in Umbral, Shade finished. You become part of Umbral, Lucian corrected quietly. The realm absorbs what it can use. The rest it simply consumes. Katrina studied the portal. The shimmer was becoming more defined now, less like heat haze, more like a tear in reality itself. How certain are you that Syrien is in there? Not certain, Lucian admitted. But the intelligence suggests it. She disappeared into Umbral's edges approximately 3 weeks ago. The realm has been unusually active since then. That suggests either a significant threat or a significant power source. Either way, she's connected to it. Rose stepped closer to the circle, her flame-heart crystal flaring slightly in response to the portal's energy. The artifact seemed to recognize something in Umbral's frequency, something that made it pulse with molten red and gold light. It knows you're coming, Lucien observed, watching the crystal's reaction. Umbral always knows when shadow walkers approach. The question is whether it welcomes you or hunts you. Shade checked the equipment one final time. His enchanted greatsword was secure. The cloaking charges, 12 hockey puck-sized spheres of compressed demolition power, each one self-cloaking once placed, each one capable of flattening structures, were distributed across his tactical harness. The EMP grenades, calibrated to overload Black Dawn rifle technology into explosive failure, were secured in individual pouches. Everything rune-etched, everything enchanted, everything ready for a realm that consumed what didn't belong. Katrina adjusted her position, drawing her silver katana moonshadow part-way from its sheath. The blade hummed faintly, responding to Umbral's proximity. Her tungsten darts, each one etched with glyphs designed to cut through shadow magic, hung in their bandolier at her side. Ready. The bullwhip hung coiled at Rose's side, rune-etched leather that would hold its form even in Umbral's reality-warping darkness. The flame-heart crystal continued to pulse, responding to her readiness. Lucien moved to the portal's edge. The shimmer was becoming clearer now, not a tear but a doorway. On the other side, shadows moved with a life of their own. The darkness of Umbral pressed against the barrier, waiting, patient, hungry. A final observation, Lucien said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen more than most. The archive isn't just hidden. It's guarded. Black Dawn didn't leave it undefended. And if Syrien has made contact with whatever power exists in Umbral, then the archive may already be doubly protected. He turned to face them directly. You're not just infiltrators, you're competitors. There may be others already seeking what you're seeking, and some of them won't care if you walk out alive. Good, Shade said quietly. Neither do we. Lucien's smile widened. A sharp, cutting thing. Then we have an understanding. He raised his hand. The portal flared. The doorway to Umbral opened completely, and the shadows on the other side surged forward like water against a breaking dam. They didn't pour through, the wards held, but they pressed, aware, testing, recognizing kindred darkness, in the three figures about to cross. Walk between the marked stones, Lucian instructed. The passage will hold for approximately 30 seconds. After that, you're committed. The portal closes. You're in Umbral, and Umbral is very much in you. Shade stepped to the circle's edge. Katrina moved to his side. Rose positioned herself at the third point, her hand resting on her bullwhip, the flame heart crystal burning hot against her chest. Lucian watched them, and his expression, for just a moment, shifted to something that looked almost like genuine concern. The child is your priority, but if retrieving them costs you the archive, let the child die. The house has made its needs clear. Understood, Rose said. But I hope, Lucien continued, that you're clever enough to retrieve both. Because neither of you will survive Umbral without completing both objectives. The realm demands payment. It always does. The portal flared brighter. The 30-second passage was beginning. Shade drew his enchanted greatsword, its length catching shadows like light. Katrina's silver katana blazed faintly, its rune etchings humming with anticipation. Rose's bullwhip uncoiled, the flame heart crystal pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Come back alive, Lucien said quietly. That's not an order. That's a statement. The House of Night Whispers doesn't invest in failures. 3 shadows walked into the portal. The darkness of Umbral rose to meet them. For a moment, suspended between realms, caught in the space between possible and real, they existed nowhere. The air burned with the friction of 2 realities rubbing against each other. The pressure was immense, absolute, a weight that wanted to compress them into nothing. Then gravity reasserted itself. They fell. Umbral! They landed hard on obsidian ground that felt almost liquid beneath their feet, resisting and yielding in equal measure. The sky above, if it could be called a sky, was layers of twilight, deep purple bleeding into charcoal, bleeding into absolute black. Stars burned overhead, but they burned cold, their light seeming to diminish rather than illuminate. The air was thick, not with heat, but with presence. Umbral surrounded them immediately, pressing against their skin, tasting them, assessing them. Shade was first to move. His eyes adjusted instantly to the darkness. Centuries of shadow walking meant his pupils dilated to capture every photon, every nuance of shadow. The realm spread before them in layers. Close details were sharp, distinct. Distant details faded into purposeful darkness. They stood in what had once been a plaza of some kind. Ruined buildings stretched away in all directions. Architecture that predated Murkdusk by centuries. Older structures that suggested Umbral had once been something other than Shadow Realm. Ruins of civilization, slowly being consumed by growing darkness. Katrina's shadow senses activated immediately. She could feel Umbral responding to her presence, the darkness recognizing her as something like itself, something born of twilight and shadow. It wasn't hostile, not yet, but it was aware, watching. Rose checked her equipment, eyes scanning the plaza for threats. Her flameheart crystal had dimmed slightly since crossing the portal, as if the ambient darkness was dampening its heat, or as if Umbral was teaching it caution. The bullwhip remained coiled at her side, ready. Her fire-kissed armor gleamed faintly, the only light source in the darkness that seemed almost defiant. 30 seconds, Shade said quietly, his voice carrying only as far as necessary. Portals sealed. Midnight tomorrow, or we're trapped. Rose pulled out her journal, flipping to the first marked passage. We're in the outer market, the ruins of what used to be Concordia's sister city. The safe passages begin here. First landmark is a fountain carved with guardian runes. Used to be in the plaza center. She looked up, scanning the darkness. The fountain was still there. Barely. It had been covered in creeping shadow vines, ancient plants that grew from nothing and sustained themselves on darkness itself. But the guardian runes were still visible beneath the growth, still faintly glowing with residual protective magic. That way, Rose pointed. We move quiet, we move fast. Umbral tolerates what it recognizes, but it hunts what it doesn't understand. Shade and Katrina exchanged a look. No words needed. They'd trained together long enough that eye contact was sufficient communication. They moved into the darkness, three shadows among shadows, walking deeper into a realm that had learned to consume. Behind them, the portal site faded into obscurity, just one more ruin among countless ruins, just one more darkness among endless darkness. Umbral closed around them like water. And somewhere in the depths of that darkness, in places they didn't yet know, in power they couldn't yet comprehend, Syrien waited with her child. Not wounded, not dying, but changed. Chapter 3, Shadows Hunt. The first markers appeared after 3 hours of careful navigation through Umbral's twisted passages. Rose led them through the ruins with her journal open, tracing the faded notations she'd made decades ago. The Guardian runes still glowed faintly beneath shadow vines, still functional, still marking the safe routes. The realm's darkness pressed against them constantly, testing, probing, but recognizing what they were. Shadow walkers, creatures of twilight, not invaders. Not yet. Shade moved behind her with predator grace, his massive enchanted greatsword ready but not drawn. Katrina stayed to the flank, her silver katana moonshadow catching what little light existed in this place. Both of them moved with the efficiency of soldiers who'd done this 100 times. But Rose moved like she was remembering. The passage splits ahead, she said quietly, checking her journal against landmarks that hadn't changed in 90 years. Left leads deeper into the lowlands, too exposed. We go right, stay in the old riverbeds. Umbral's water doesn't flow anymore, but the passages are stable. Shade nodded. Katrina adjusted her position without comment. They descended into the riverbed, and the shadows grew thicker. Not threatening, not yet, but dense, layered. The kind of darkness that had weight, history, presence. How long have you been mapping this? Katrina asked, eyeing the journal with interest. Long time, Rose said. Not a lie. Not quite the full truth either. When you live in a realm, you learn where the teeth are. Where it hunts, where it sleeps. They walked in silence for a while, the only sound the faint scrape of their boots on obsidian stone. The air grew colder as they descended, and the red glow of Umbral's core, visible through gaps in the stone ceiling, cast everything in bloody shadows. 2 hours in, Rose felt it. The landscape was changing. The ruins around them were becoming familiar. Not in a way her mind recognized consciously, but in a way her body did. Her breath came slightly shorter. Her grip on the journal tightened. The northern reaches. She recognized the jagged canyon walls, the fissures that breathed with unnatural heat, the way the shadows moved here, not with the predatory grace of the rest of Umbral, but with something more chaotic, something hungry and confused. This was where shadow beasts nested. We need to move faster, Rose said, her voice slightly tighter than before. The shadow beasts are active in this sector. She stopped. Ahead, half buried in shadow vines and broken stone, were the ruins of a shelter. A small cave, its entrance marked with runes she recognized. Her runes. The ones she'd drawn 90 years ago with flame and desperation, marking safe places, places she'd need to hide, places she'd felt safe. Shade noticed her sudden stillness. Rose. It's nothing, she said too quickly. Just, the beasts hunt heavily here. We should... The ground erupted. Shadow beasts poured from the fissures like liquid darkness taking form. Dozens of them, their twisted bodies writhing, their glowing red eyes locking onto the 3 intruders with predatory focus. Their screeches echoed through the canyon, high-pitched and furious, a sound like reality being torn. Contact! Shade moved immediately, his great sword clearing its sheath with lethal grace. Katrina was already moving, her silver katana blazing as she cut down the first wave. The rune etchings on the blade hummed with power designed specifically for shadow magic. The beasts dissolved into ash when they touched her steel. Rose's bullwhip uncoiled with a crack that echoed off stone. The rune-etched leather ignited with fire, molten red and gold, responding to her will, to her anger, to her focus. The same whip, the same fire. 90 years later, and it still remembers. The shadow beasts were no match for 3 enhanced warriors. Shade took down 5 with economical, brutal strikes. Katrina carved through another cluster, her movements precise and efficient. Rose's whip, fed by the flame heart crystal burning at her throat, painted arcs of living flame that consumed everything they touched. In less than 2 minutes, the beasts were gone. But Rose didn't stop fighting. Her whip lashed out at nothing, at shadows, at ghosts. The fire around it burned hotter, brighter, consuming the air itself. She was breathing hard, her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on the shelter behind them. "Rose!" Katrina's voice cut through. "Contact's over!" "Rose!" Shade grabbed her shoulder. The moment his hand touched her, he knew something had shifted. She was still, controlled, completely focused. "The shelter," Rose said quietly, her voice carrying absolute certainty. "I need to check it." "We need to move," Shade said, practical. "More beasts could—" "I need to check it." The tone of her voice left no room for argument. Rose walked toward the ruins, her movements controlled and precise. The flameheart crystal at her throat pulsed with light, responding to her emotional state, feeding on her clarity. Shade and Katrina exchanged a glance. Neither of them understood what was happening, but both recognized the signs. Something in this place mattered to Rose, and it was connected to their mission. Inside the shelter, the evidence was undeniable. Burned stones arranged in a circle for a fire. Torn fabric, weathered black cloth, possibly from armor. A flask, half buried in ash. And scratched into the stone wall with what looked like fingernails, driven by something other than desperation. Initials. 2 of them. Intertwined. R plus K. Katrina studied the markings silently. Shade checked the fabric. It was old. Very old. 90 years old at least. Rose walked straight into the center of the shelter like she was walking through a memory. She didn't stop, didn't pause, just catalogued everything with the precision of someone reading an open book. "That's the shelter," she said, not bothering to point. "Where Kalian and I stayed during the Flameheart mission 90 years ago." Her tone was matter-of-fact, almost conversational. Shade exchanged a glance with Katrina. This wasn't the reaction they'd expected. "Rose," Katrina started. "Kalian," Rose said, cutting her off smoothly. "Order lackey, spy, beautiful liar. I trusted him." She paused, a thin smile crossing her face. "I shouldn't have. By order standards, he was exactly what they wanted him to be. Charming, manipulative, utterly dedicated to control. He read people perfectly. Or so he thought." She turned to look at them, and her eyes were sharp as knives. "Turns out I read better. I framed him for stealing the Flameheart crystal. He got arrested. I burned the fortress to ash and walked through a collapsing portal while he reached for me with an outstretched hand." She glanced back at the initials. "Except I made one mistake." "You left him alive," Shade said quietly. "I left him alive," Rose confirmed. Her voice carried no hesitation, just acknowledgement of fact. "He should have died under that falling stone. Instead, he crawled out of the ashes, rebuilt the fortress stronger, consolidated Black Dawn's power, and became Ultranacious Eternus." Katrina leaned forward slightly. "Gunnar killed him." "Yes, Gunnar killed him," Rose said. Her voice didn't change, but her eyes hardened. "Lost his arm, and his eye doing it. Had to sacrifice everything just to end what I allowed to grow 90 years ago." She pulled out her journal and flipped it open, pointing to a marked location. "The Fortress of the Grey. 12 kilometers from here. It's where everything converges. The safe passages, the routes, all of it leads there. Because Kalian built it to be the heart of Umbral." She looked at them both with the confidence of someone who'd already calculated every angle. Gunnar is the only one who knows I destroyed the fortress, the only one who knows I spared Kalian, the only one who knows that I created the thing he had to kill, and what it cost him to do it. Rose's smile sharpened. Predatory. That decision 90 years ago cost him an arm, an eye, and nearly his life. She said it like someone reciting a casualty report. No emotion, just numbers and consequences. So we're walking into the fortress to retrieve a child and steal an archive from the ashes of a man I should have let die 90 years ago. Rose tucked the journal away and looked them both in the eye. That's the situation. Are we clear? Shade studied her carefully. He'd seen soldiers in 100 battles with less certainty in their voice. How long until we reach it? 12 kilometers. Maybe 3 hours, depending on terrain. Rose turned toward the exit. We're burning daylight and Lucian's window is closing. We move now, we push hard, we get in, get the child, get the archive, and get out. Katrina fell into step beside her. And Syrien? Unknown condition. That's why we're going in blind, Rose said. She moved through the shelter's opening with predatory grace. But what I know is this. The fortress is Kalian's creation. Even though he's dead, it's still his stronghold. And if Syrien is hiding there with the child, she's doing it for reasons we haven't figured out yet. She glanced back at the shelter one final time, then forward toward the deeper darkness of Umbral. But what I know is certain. I made a mistake 90 years ago that cost Gunnar everything. I'm not making mistakes anymore. Her voice was cold as winter stone. We go in, we complete the mission, and we finish what needs finishing. She said it with such absolute certainty that neither Shade nor Katrina questioned whether she could deliver. And Shade caught up to her as they descended deeper into the canyon. You're good? Better than good, Rose replied. She flashed him that predatory smile, the one that suggested she'd already won the game and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. I'm focused. 90 years of carrying that mistake, and now I get to see it through to the end. She looked at him sideways. The real question is whether you two are ready for what we're walking into. Because Black Dawn is protecting that fortress with everything they have, and we're probably going to have to fight for every inch. Katrina's hand rested on her katana's hilt. We've handled worse. Have you? Rose's smile widened. Because I haven't. Not since the night I walked into this shelter with a man I thought I could trust, and walked out with the Flameheart crystal and a burning fortress behind me. She turned her full attention forward, toward the fortress that waited in the darkness. Let's go finish this. They moved back out into the shadows of Umbral. 3 predators descending toward a fortress built on ash and regret, and the ghost of a god who was finally, mercifully dead. Behind them, the shelter stood empty except for memories that 90 years hadn't faded. Ahead of them, the fortress waited, and inside it, Syrien carried something, knowledge, consciousness, power, that no one yet understood. The next 12 kilometers would be the last chance to prepare for what was coming. Because when they reached the Fortress of the Grey, everything would change. Chapter 4. The Fortress Gates. The gates of the Fortress of the Grey loomed before them like the mouth of something ancient and hungry. Rose had expected to feel something when she saw it. Nostalgia, dread, rage. Instead, she felt nothing but cold calculation and a thin smile. This fortress was rebuilt, but it was not the one she'd destroyed. The stones were newer, the architecture reinforced. Kalian had learned from her fire. Too bad he was dead. We're splitting up here, Rose said, her voice carrying the absolute confidence of someone who'd infiltrated hostile territory 100 times. Shade, Katrina. You slip in through the east side. There's an old maintenance passage, probably still accessible. The archive is top floor. Find it, catalogue it, wait for extraction. Shade nodded once. Katrina was already scanning the shadows, mapping entry points. And you? Shade asked. Rose smiled, that predatory smile that made men's spines straighten. I'm going through the front door, and I'm going to make them want to let me in. She walked toward the fortress entrance with the confidence of someone who belonged there. 2 Black Dawn soldiers stood guard, and they didn't stop her. Why would they? She moved like she had every right to be there, and her fire-kissed armor caught the light in ways that made them forget their protocols. Inside the fortress, recruits moved through corridors in organized units, training drills, the smell of weapons oil and sweat. Everything about it screamed military installation. Rose found the officers' quarters easily. She'd memorized this place 90 years ago, and even though it had been rebuilt, the fundamental layout remained the same. Power flows the same way in any fortress. She found the captain reviewing tactical reports, broad-shouldered, confident, the kind of man who'd never been refused. She walked into his private quarters without knocking and closed the door behind her. "You look like someone with authority," she said, her voice dropping into that register that made men's spines straighten. It was an octave lower than her speaking voice, threaded with promise and danger. Her flameheart crystal glowed softly at her throat, just bright enough to catch the light and draw his eye. The captain turned, startled, hand moving toward his weapon before stopping. His eyes travelled from her face to her body, the fire-kissed armor that hugged her form, the bullwhip coiled at her side, the raw predatory confidence in how she moved. "I'm not sure I should," he started. "Of course you shouldn't," Rose said, moving closer. She rested a hand on his arm, her touch feather-light but deliberate, letting him feel the warmth of the flame-heart crystal through her skin. That's what makes this so exciting, doesn't it? Breaking protocol with someone who actually understands the weight of what you do. She was in his space now, close enough that he could smell the warmth of her fire magic, close enough that his breathing had changed. She watched it happen, the moment his military discipline flickered and his body took over, the moment a man saw her and stopped thinking with his brain. "Tell me something," she continued, her voice intimate. She took his hand and placed it on her hip, guiding him, showing him what she wanted. "What does Black Dawn actually want with this region?" The captain's hand trembled slightly as it settled on her hip. His eyes were locked on the flame-heart crystal, watching it pulse with soft red light, in rhythm with her heartbeat. "I'm not sure I should—" He started again, but it was a reflex. His body was already leaning toward her, already committed. "But you're going to," Rose said. It wasn't a question. She moved her other hand up his chest, feeling his heart racing, feeling the heat of him. She let her fingers trail across his neck, over the hard line of his jaw. "Because you want to. Because I can see it in your eyes." She kissed him then. Not softly, but with promise and danger mingled together. Her teeth caught his lower lip, and when she pulled back there was a faint trace of blood. She licked it away slowly, deliberately, letting him watch. "Syrien," she whispered against his ear, her hand now wrapped around his throat, light enough to be seductive, tight enough to be a threat. "Tell me about Syrien. Tell me what Black Dawn knows." The captain's breathing was ragged now, his pupils dilated. He was caught between desire and fear, and Rose wielded both like weapons. "She's not here," he gasped. His hand on her hip tightened, desperate. "She was here maybe a week ago, but she left. She's recovering, consolidating power to the north, building something." Rose's hand tightened around his throat just enough to make his eyes widen. "Building what?" "No one knows," he choked out. The conflict in his face was exquisite, the desire to answer her warring with self-preservation. Rose leaned back and smiled. She could feel the arousal radiating off him, could feel his need to please her, to give her what she wanted. She ran her fingers down his chest and stepped away, leaving him standing there trembling, desperate. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me." She didn't hesitate. Her hand moved with surgical precision, finding the pressure point at the base of his skull, pressing in with calculated force. She felt his windpipe collapse under her palm, felt the desperate gasp as his body tried to breathe through the crushed tissue. She held him there, watching his eyes widen with panic and betrayal, watching him understand that the intimacy had been a lie, that she'd used him, that he was dying. She let him fall. His body hit the floor with a wet, gurgling sound as blood filled his lungs. He tried to crawl, tried to reach for the door, but Rose was already moving, already gone. She moved toward the corridor, calculating routes, adrenaline singing through her veins, and stopped cold. An old woman stood in the doorway, her face weathered by 90 years, her eyes locked on Rose with unmistakable recognition. She was small, bent, carrying a tray of food that clattered to the floor. "You," the woman whispered. Her voice was thin, reedy, but her eyes are sharp. "You're alive." "You came back." Rose recognized her instantly. Kitchen staff. Old. Had been at the fortress when Rose trained there, had brought her food once when she was injured, showed her a kindness the order didn't allow. An innocent, Rose smiled. That slow, predatory smile that suggested she'd already calculated every possible outcome. "Well," Rose said, her voice dripping with sarcasm and amusement, "just don't stand there. Go warn everybody." She gestured toward the alarm with her chin, her eyes still locked on the old woman's, her smile never wavering. The challenge was clear. Go ahead. Sound it. See what happens. The old woman's hand trembled as it moved toward the alarm. Rose didn't stop her. The alarm. The klaxon that erupted through the fortress was deafening. Magical bells, warning sirens, the wail of ancient wards. Black Dawn's entire training base mobilized in seconds. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Red light flashed in synchronized pulses. Soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, trained by Black Dawn to respond to threats with lethal precision. And Rose's demeanor shifted completely. The mask of seduction fell away. The predator was unleashed. She was no longer infiltrating. She was no longer sneaking through shadows. She was burning. Top floor. Shade and Katrina froze as the alarm erupted through the fortress. They were standing in front of a sealed vault door covered in magical wards that made the air shimmer and distort. The archive was beyond this door. They could feel it, the hum of ancient knowledge, of power, of secrets that could reshape realms. "Move," Shade said, already working on the wards, his shadow magic wrapped around the enchantments, testing, probing for weaknesses. His fingers bled where the wards bit back, but he didn't stop. Katrina moved to the door's frame, her silver katana drawn. If soldiers came up these stairs, they would find her waiting. Below them, the fortress erupted into controlled chaos. Soldiers mobilizing, recruits scrambling, commanders barking orders through communication enchantments. And Rose fighting, she had no choice. The alarm had gone up, and there was no going back. The infiltration was over. Now it was warfare. The first 3 soldiers who came through the corridor came fast, trained, focused, ready to kill. Rose didn't hesitate. She uncoiled her bullwhip with a crack that echoed off stone. The moment the leather touched her hands, the flameheart crystal surged with power. The whip ignited, not just burning but blazing, molten red and gold flames that wrapped around the rune-etched leather like a living thing. The first soldier tried to dodge, but the flaming whip found him mid-stride. The fire didn't just burn, it consumed. His body caught like kindling, and he screamed as the flames raced across his armor, melted through his skin, turned muscle and bone to ash. In seconds, there was nothing left but a pile of smoking grey powder on the corridor floor. "Oops," Rose said sweetly. "Did I singe your armor?" The second soldier came in hard and fast, trying to get inside her reach. Rose pivoted and cracked the whip again. The flames lashed out and wrapped around his arm. He screamed as the fire climbed up his body, a sound that was abruptly cut off as his lungs filled with ash from the inside. He collapsed mid-stride, his body still smoking. The third soldier actually had the good sense to turn and run. Rose let him go. She was already reading the remaining soldiers coming down the corridor behind him. No point wasting fire magic on someone fleeing when reinforcements were incoming. More soldiers came. 3 this time, moving in formation. Black Dawn tactical doctrine. Rose felt the anger rise in her chest, anger at the fortress, at Kalian, at 90 years of carrying a mistake. The Flameheart crystal responded to her emotional state, glowing brighter, hotter. The flames at the end of her whip burned so hot they left afterimages in the air. She cracked the whip and the fire painted a line of pure devastation through the corridor. All 3 soldiers tried to dodge. None of them made it. They turned to ash mid-step, their forms crumbling like paper in an inferno. But she could feel the drain. Each use of the fire magic cost her energy. Each incineration pulled power from her reserves. The Flameheart crystal was managing her power output, keeping her from going supernova. But it couldn't prevent the fatigue. More soldiers came. This time Rose switched tactics. She let the whip fall and moved into hand-to-hand combat. She was fast, brutal, efficient. A soldier came at her with a blade, and Rose broke his wrist with a palm strike, then drove her knee up into his face. His nose shattered, and he dropped. Another soldier tried to grab her from behind. Rose pivoted and drove her elbow backward, connecting with his throat. He went down, gasping, unable to breathe. She was conserving her fire magic now, using it strategically rather than constantly. Hand to hand when she could, fire when she needed to. Each movement calculated to preserve her strength for what was coming. But there were too many soldiers. The reinforcements kept coming, wave after wave of Black Dawn-trained personnel. Rose felt the anger rising again, the unfairness of it, the stupidity of them, the waste of her time. The Flameheart crystal responded. It burned brighter. "Okay," Rose said, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "Enough playing nice." She unleashed the fire. The next wave of soldiers didn't even make it to her. Rose cracked her whip and the flames spread like a living thing down the corridor. The fire moved with purpose, with intelligence, as if the whip was directing pure molten rage. Soldiers caught in the conflagration turned to ash, mid-scream. Their armor melted. Their weapons disintegrated. Their bodies simply ceased to exist. The corridor became an inferno, heat radiating so intensely that the stone walls started to crack. Ash drifted through the air like snow, the remains of a dozen soldiers, now nothing but grey powder floating on superheated wind. Rose stood in the center of the destruction, breathing hard. Her armor was still perfectly intact. The fire-kissed enchantments protecting her, but she could feel the toll the magic was taking. Her muscles trembled slightly. Her vision was starting to blur at the edges. She'd used too much fire, too fast. She forced herself to focus. Shade and Katrina needed her. The archive needed her. She had to keep moving. She planted one of the charges and activated it as backup soldiers began to converge. The explosion created a barrier of falling stone, giving her seconds she desperately needed. She ran. Top floor. "Got it!" Shade said as the vault door swung open. His hands were bleeding from the wards, his shadow magic depleted, but the door was open. Beyond it lay shelves of ancient texts, artifacts that pulsed with dimensional magic, knowledge that could reshape how people understood realms themselves. Books bound in leather that might have been human skin. Crystals that hummed with frequencies that made Katrina's teeth ache. Scrolls written in languages that predated modern civilization. Katrina grabbed a containment case from her pack, designed specifically to hold magical artifacts without triggering them. They worked with ruthless efficiency, loading the most critical pieces. The archive was vast, but they only needed the essentials. They could hear the chaos below. Massive destruction, screams cut short, the sound of stone falling. "How much time?" Katrina asked, her hand moving fast, precise. "Not enough," Shade replied. He sealed another piece of ancient knowledge into the case. "We're out of time." They sealed the containment case and headed for the stairs. Not the main stairs where soldiers would be converging, but the back stairs, the ones Rose had told them about. ROSE. She was 2 floors down and she was running on fumes. The flame heart crystal still glowed at her throat, but its light was dimmer now. She'd pushed too hard, burned too hot. Her reserves were depleted. The hand-to-hand fighting was getting slower. Her reflexes weren't as sharp. More soldiers came, and this time Rose couldn't burn them all. She had to fight. She dropped a soldier with a strike to the solar plexus. Another came, and she twisted and used his own momentum against him, sending him crashing into the wall hard enough to crack stone. His body crumpled. But there was blood on her face now, a cut over her eye from a lucky strike. Her left arm was screaming, either dislocated or broken, she wasn't sure. She couldn't use it effectively anymore. She switched to southpaw and kept fighting. A soldier came in hard with a blade, and Rose slapped the weapon away, then drove her palm into his face. His head snapped back, and he went down. She was breathing hard now, really hard. Her vision was tunneling. She could feel the edge of something dangerous, the place where if she pushed her fire magic any harder, the flame heart crystal wouldn't be able to contain it, the place where she might lose control completely. She didn't have a choice. She planted a charge in a critical support corridor and armed it for remote detonation. She ran harder. She reached the stairwell and started climbing. Her lungs were on fire, not from magic but from pure physical exertion. Her muscles were screaming. Her vision was starting to dim. How many more floors? How many more soldiers? She didn't know. She just kept moving. And then Shade was there, appearing from the shadows above her like a guardian angel, his great sword drawn. A moment later, Katrina descended the stairs with the containment case secured to her pack, her eyes sharp, her katana ready. "Archive," Shade said simply. "Secure," Katrina confirmed. "We go now. We might live." Rose's knees almost buckled with relief, but she forced them to lock. She was covered in blood, not all of it from wounds, some of it spray from incinerated soldiers. Her armor was scorched. Her left arm hung useless at her side. Her breathing was ragged and desperate, but she was still standing. "Follow me," Rose said, her voice rough, "and don't look back." She led them through maintenance corridors that she remembered from her time training here. Narrow passages that recruits didn't know about, roots carved into the fortress's bones 90 years ago. Soldiers came behind them, and Rose had no fire left. She fought them with what remained, fists, kicks, brutal efficiency. She broke one's neck with a precise strike. Another she choked unconscious. She was operating on pure instinct and adrenaline now. No finesse, just survival. Shade covered their rear, his greatsword cutting down anything that got too close. Katrina moved with lethal grace, her katana and throwing darts doing the work of 5 soldiers. Rose placed the last charges as they moved. No fire, just physical placement. When the soldiers got close, she armed them remotely and the charges detonated, creating barriers of falling stone. They reached the eastern exit, the maintenance passage Shade and Katrina had used to enter, the passage Rose had told them about. "Go," she said. "Not without you," Shade replied. "I'm right behind." The corridor behind them erupted with soldiers, commander-level training, moving with precision and purpose, Black Downs elite, professional, dangerous. Rose pulled out one of the remaining charges and armed it for a 5-second timer. The device hummed in her palm, counting down. She had maybe seconds before these soldiers were on top of them. She reached down into herself for one more burst of fire magic. The flameheart crystal at her throat flared, responding to her desperation. She could feel the danger of it, how close she was to losing control, to the supernova point where the crystal wouldn't be able to contain her power anymore. She didn't care. Rose raised her bullwhip one last time. The fire that erupted from it was brilliant, almost white-hot, so intense it left after-images in the air. She drew a line of pure flame between her team and the incoming soldiers. For a moment the corridor became a furnace, and the soldiers had to retreat or be incinerated. That was all the time they needed. "Move!" she shouted. Shade and Katrina moved, Rose threw the charge down the corridor and ran. Behind her, the explosion echoed through the fortress, soldiers screaming, stone falling, the sound of Black Dawn's training base starting to collapse under the weight of its own defences being used against it. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. If she looked back, she'd see the devastation, and she wasn't sure she had the strength to process it. They hit the maintenance passage and ran through darkness. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit. Around them, the stone pressing in like a living thing. In front of them, the faint red glow of Umbral's outer reaches. The passage opened to the eastern wall of the fortress, and suddenly they were outside. Umbral's red glow illuminated the ruins around them, and Rose stumbled. Her left knee buckled. She went down hard on the rocks. Shade caught her before she could fall completely, his arm around her waist. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad," Rose admitted. She could taste blood. Her ribs felt like shattered glass. The left side of her body was a constellation of injuries. "Really bad. Can't feel my left arm." "Dislocated," Katrina said, checking her rapidly. "Possibly broken. Cracked rib, maybe 2. Concussion." "Fantastic," Rose said, but she was smiling. Even battered, even bleeding, even on the edge of collapse, she was smiling. "Let's move before I lose consciousness." "Portal site," Katrina said, checking her chronometer. Her voice was tight. 3 kilometers northeast. We move fast, we make the window. Maybe. They moved, not ran. Moved. Rose couldn't run anymore. Her body was past its limit, but she could move, could keep putting one foot in front of the other, could lean on Shade's shoulder and keep going. Behind them, the fortress was in chaos. Alarms still wailing, soldiers mobilizing, Black Dawn recruits trying to organize a pursuit that was impossible now that Rose had literally burned through their defenses. The 3 of them were ghosts, vanishing into Umbral's shadows, moving toward the portal, running out of time. Rose didn't look back at the fortress, didn't acknowledge the place where she'd been transformed, where she'd loved and been betrayed, where she'd made the mistake of sparing a man who became a god. She looked forward instead, at the darkness ahead, at the mission not yet complete, because Syrien was out there, consolidated, recovered. And Rose had just learned that everything they thought they knew was wrong. The child wasn't at the fortress. Syrien wasn't waiting to be extracted. The world had shifted while they were fighting. And now they had less than 3 hours to reach the portal, extract with the archive, and figure out where the hell Syrien actually was. Chapter 5. The Portal. They made it 5 kilometers from the fortress before Rose's legs started to give out. They'd been moving through Umbral's twisted passages with single-minded purpose, pushing through pain and exhaustion and the bone-deep certainty that if they stopped, they wouldn't be able to start again. The red glow of the realm painted everything in shades of blood and fire. Behind them, the alarms of the fortress had long since faded, but the echo of them seemed to follow anyway. Shade finally called a halt when Rose stumbled for the 3rd time in as many minutes. "Break," he said simply, moving to steady her before she went down completely. "You're no good to the mission unconscious." "I'm fine," Rose said automatically, which was a lie they both recognized immediately. She was barely standing, her left arm hanging useless at her side, her face pale beneath the blood and soot. "You're not fine," Katrina said, already checking their position. "But we have time. Sit." Rose didn't have the energy to argue. She sat on a smooth black stone, her breathing still ragged, her body shaking with delayed shock and adrenaline crash. Shade approached her carefully, the way someone approaches a wounded predator, which Rose supposed was accurate. "Your arm," he said, examining the shoulder with professional efficiency. His hands were gentle, but his assessment was quick and clinical. "Dislocated. Anterior. We need to reset it before the swelling gets worse." Rose nodded. She'd known it was dislocated. She could feel it, that wrong grinding sensation in the joint, the way her arm hung at an unnatural angle. She'd fought through worse, but that didn't make it less painful. "This is going to hurt," Shade said. "Everything hurts," Rose replied, which was fair. Shade positioned himself behind her, one hand gripping her upper arm, the other on her shoulder blade. "Ready?" "No," Rose said, "but do it anyway." Shade applied steady pressure, rotating her arm with controlled precision. For a moment, there was just wrongness. That awful sensation of bone grinding against bone, of a joint desperately seeking its proper place. Rose's breath came sharp and fast through gritted teeth, her whole body tensing against the pain. Then the shoulder popped back into place with a sensation that was somehow worse and better simultaneously. Rose gasped, her eyes watering from the intensity of it. "Okay," Shade said, releasing her carefully. "The good news is your shoulder is back where it's supposed to be." Rose was breathing hard, sweat beading on her forehead. "And the bad news?" "The bad news is you're going to wish it was dislocated again about 5 minutes from now when the pain really settles in," Shade said. He paused, then added with absolutely zero inflection. "You could say, I really put my shoulder into that one." There was a beat of complete silence. Katrina made a strangled noise that might have been a laugh or might have been a cough. Rose stared at Shade with genuine surprise. Then she actually smiled. A real smile, not the predatory one she wore like armor. "Did you just make a pun?" she asked, her voice warm with genuine amusement. "About my shoulder?" "It was a good pun," Shade said defensively. His voice carried no inflection, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he was aware of exactly how awkward the timing was. "You were in pain. I attempted humor. It's called interpersonal bonding." "Interpersonal bonding," Rose repeated, and she was actually laughing now. Real laughter, not the sharp, dangerous kind she wielded as a weapon. Just laughter. The kind that came from genuine amusement at someone trying so hard and failing so spectacularly. "Was it successful?" Shade asked. "Surprisingly," Rose said. She rotated her shoulder carefully, testing the joint. It was already starting to swell, and the pain was building exactly as he'd predicted. But the movement was possible now. Functional. That was terrible, but also kind of sweet. "I don't do sweet," Shade said. "Clearly," Rose agreed. "But you just tried. That counts." Shade helped her up, his hand steady on her good arm. Katrina was already checking their position against the portal site, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows of Umbral for pursuit. "We've got time," Katrina said. "Real time. We move now. We actually might make it." Rose took a breath. Her shoulder throbbed. Her ribs felt like shattered glass. She was running on fumes and determination and spite, but she was running. "Okay," she said. "Let's finish this." They moved again, deeper into Umbral's shadows. The portal was waiting somewhere ahead, a convergence point where the barriers between realms grew thin. They didn't have comms, didn't have backup, didn't have anything except the archive, each other, and the clock counting down. The fortress was behind them now, a symbol of 90 years of mistakes and fire, and the ghosts that refused to stay buried. Ahead was extraction, and after that, everything changed. The portal site appeared exactly where Rose's had arrived, a natural convergence of shadow magic and dimensional energy. The nexus point was carved from Umbral's living stone. The ancient chamber was vast and circular, its walls covered in runes that hummed with latent power. The air itself felt thin here, as if reality hadn't quite decided which realm this place belonged to. Rose checked her chronometer. They had maybe 15 minutes before the extraction window closed. The House of Night Whispers would have their portal open on the other side, waiting for the signal, ready to pull them through. Shade was already pulling out his signalling crystal, a small prism that would alert the facility that they were ready for extraction. Katrina checked the containment case one final time, making sure the archive was secure against accidental detonation. Rose leaned against the chamber wall, breathing carefully. Every breath made her ribs scream, every movement sent fresh pain through her shoulder. She was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from pushing past your limits and then pushing past them again. "Signal sent," Shade said. "House of Night Whispers should have portal coordinates locked. Give it maybe 90 seconds for them to establish the connection." He was right. The runes on the chamber walls began to glow. Not from Shade's activation, but from the House of Night Whispers coordinating from their end. Blue light crackled across the ancient symbols in a specific pattern, the facility's mages working in concert with Umbral's natural convergence points. The air itself started to shimmer and distort as reality began to fold in on itself. "Here it comes!" Katrina called out. A shimmering gate materialized in the center of the chamber, a window of dimensional magic shaped and controlled from the House of Night Whispers' side. This wasn't Umbral's wild energy. This was precise, coordinated, professional. The portal hummed with the signature of the facility's dimensional mages. Through the gate, Rose could see the arrival chamber at the House of Night Whispers. Concrete walls, reinforced containment barriers, and beyond that, the shadowed figures of facility personnel, standing ready. "Go," Shade said. "Portal's stable, but it won't hold long." Shade and Katrina moved toward it immediately, carrying the containment case between them. The moment they crossed the threshold, Rose could see them solidify on the other side, appearing inside the House of Night Whispers facility. Katrina was already moving to secure the perimeter. Shade was checking his weapons. Rose pushed off from the wall and moved to join them. Every step sent fresh waves of pain through her damaged body, but she kept moving. This was the extraction point. This was survival. She looked back at Umbral one final time, at the shadows that had surrounded her for so long, at the fortress of the grey still visible in the distance, still burning with the aftermath of her passage. 90 years, and it was still burning. She turned back to the portal and walked through. The transition was instantaneous. One moment she was in Umbral's red-tinged darkness, the next she was stepping into the controlled environment of the House of Night Whispers' arrival chamber. The temperature shift hit her first. Umbral's oppressive cold replaced by Concordia's more temperate air. The sound changed too. Umbral's whispers and shadows replaced by the hum of magical containment fields and the presence of trained personnel. Rose stumbled as she crossed the threshold, her exhausted body finally catching up with her. Shade caught her before she could fall, his hand steady on her good arm. Behind her, the portal collapsed with a sound like glass breaking, the connection between Umbral and Concordia severed. The archive was through. The mission objective was delivered. They stood in the arrival chamber, bleeding and exhausted and victorious. Around them, facility personnel moved with practiced efficiency. The containment case was secured. The extraction was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Chapter 6. The Debrief. The arrival chamber of the House of Night Whispers was sterile and efficient. Concrete walls, reinforced containment barriers, cold lighting, everything designed for function, nothing designed for comfort. Lucien was waiting. He stood with the casual authority of someone accustomed to command, his silver hair catching the facility's harsh light. His mismatched eyes, one natural, one artificial but perfectly functional, assessed Rose with clinical precision. "Archive," he said simply by way of greeting. Katrina handed him the containment case. Lucien took it, checking the seals with practiced efficiency before nodding to a technician who took it toward the secure lab. He turned back to Rose. "You look like hell," he observed. Rose smiled, that dangerous smile that suggested she'd already calculated his death in 17 different ways and found them all satisfactory. "Funny," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I was about to say the same thing about your fashion sense." "That suit went out of style approximately never," which means it was never in style to begin with. Lucien's lips twitched. It might have been amusement, might have been indigestion. Rest, he said. We'll debrief when you're functional. We'll debrief when I'm paid, Rose replied. She was already turning away. Archive delivery was the contract. Debrief is extra. Your tab is getting expensive, Lucien. She didn't wait for his response. She walked toward the exit where Shade was already waiting, her body moving on pure willpower and spite. Every step was a negotiation between her broken body and her indomitable will. Shade didn't speak. He just steadied her arm and guided her toward the exit. Behind them, Lucien watched them go. His expression was unreadable. The House of Silver Mirrors greeted them with warmth. Not literal warmth, though that too compared to Umbral's oppressive chill, but the warmth of a place where people knew you, where safety existed not as a concept, but as a practiced reality, where one could exist without performing, without strategizing every breath. Shade brought Rose through the servants' entrance, taking the quieter routes through the house to avoid unnecessary attention, but it was impossible to avoid Darren entirely. He was in the main corridor when they arrived, and his eyes went from casual interest to sharp assessment in the space of a heartbeat. "Holy shit," he said, taking in Rose's appearance, the blood, the soot, the way she was leaning heavily on Shade, the obvious injuries. "You look like you went 10 rounds with an actual god and the god won." "Close," Rose said, her voice rough. She managed a smile despite the pain. The god was already dead. "I just fought his old house." Darren moved toward them immediately, his casual demeanor shifting into something more focused. He took Rose's other side, supporting her weight with practiced ease. "All right, let's get you inside before Lady Vess sends someone to drag you in," Darren said. There was banter in his voice, but underneath it was genuine concern. "Can you make the stairs, or do we need to use the lift?" "I can make stairs," Rose said, which was technically true if you defined make as physically move toward while suffering. "That's not what I asked," Darren replied, already adjusting his grip to support more of her weight. "Lift, no arguments. Even you have limits, Firebird." Rose didn't have the energy to argue. She let them guide her toward the lift, Shade on one side, Darren on the other, both of them solid and real in a way that contrasted sharply with Umbral's unreal shadows. "So how bad?" Darren asked, keeping up a stream of casual conversation as they moved. "And don't tell me it's fine because you look like someone tried to use you as kindling." "Dislocated shoulder, cracked ribs, concussion, general blood loss," Rose said. "Shade reset the shoulder, but it's going to be stiff for days." "And you still tried to walk," Darren said with exasperation that sounded almost fond. "Why are you like this?" "Determined," Rose offered. "Stubborn," Darren corrected. "There's a difference." They reached Rose's room, and Darren helped lower her carefully onto the bed. The moment she sat, the full weight of exhaustion crashed over her. Her body was finally allowing itself to feel everything it had been fighting through. Eli appeared in the doorway moments later, moving with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Behind her came Lady Vess's personal physician, a precise, quiet woman named Dr. Soren, who'd been with the house for years. "Let me see," Eli said. Approaching with her professional demeanor firmly in place, she began carefully examining Rose's injuries, checking the reset shoulder, listening to her breathing to assess the rib damage. Darren stayed, helping Eli move Rose's armor off piece by piece, a process that was painful and required careful coordination. He was gentle about it, his usual charm muted into something quieter, more genuine. "You're going to have some spectacular bruises," Dr. Soren observed, examining the damage professionally. "The shoulder will need support. The ribs will take time. You were fortunate. Nothing appears to be broken beyond the obvious." "Define obvious," Rose said weakly. "Cracked ribs, sprained shoulder, concussion," Dr. Soren said. "Rest, medication for the pain, and no strenuous activity for at least a week." "A week?" Rose repeated. That's not happening. A week, Dr. Soren said firmly, in the tone of someone who was not negotiating. Or we can explain to Lady Vess why you've decided to ignore medical advice. Rose considered this. Lady Vess was formidable in ways that even gods had to respect. A week, Rose agreed, which was probably a lie, but at least a lie in the right direction. Darren was already preparing the medical supplies, bandages, salves, pain medication. He worked alongside Eli and Dr. Soren with competence that suggested this wasn't his first time helping with injuries. There was a care to it that went beyond basic first aid. You know, Darren said, his voice taking on that playful tone again as he helped wrap her ribs. Most people would call what you did suicidal. Most people would rest for a month. But you have somewhere you need to be, apparently. No, Rose said, I'm actually done. For the first time in 90 years, I'm genuinely done. Darren paused. There was something in that statement that went deeper than mission exhaustion. He glanced at her face, reading her the way she read people, understanding that this wasn't about a mission anymore. Good, he said simply, returning to wrapping her ribs. Then you're going to rest like the doctor said. No sneaking off. No mysterious errands. Rest. Are you ordering me around? Rose asked, and there was genuine warmth in her voice beneath the sarcasm. Someone has to, Darren replied. Clearly you're incapable of taking care of yourself. I've survived 90 years without your guidance. And look at you, Darren said, gesturing at her injuries with exaggerated concern. Clearly it's been working great. Rose laughed despite the pain. It was real laughter. Not the sharp, dangerous kind, but something genuine. Lady Vess appeared in the doorway as Dr. Soren was finishing the wrapping. She took in the scene, Rose bandaged and medicated, Darren and Eli attending to her, with the kind of assessment that suggested she understood exactly what had happened. The house doctor is here if you need additional care, Lady Vess said. Her voice was warm but commanding. You're safe. Rest. It was a simple statement, but it carried weight. The House of Silver Mirrors was a sanctuary. Lady Vess was ensuring that Rose understood that. Thank you, Rose said. She meant it. Lady Vess nodded and withdrew, leaving Rose to the care of Eli and Darren and the quiet comfort of the house. Darren sat on the edge of the bed, his expression serious in a way that didn't suit his usual charm. Talk to me, he said. Not about the mission. About what you're done with. Rose was too exhausted to deflect, too tired to keep up the armor. Everything, she said. I'm done with everything. Darren reached out and took her hand, not flirtatiously, not as a game, but as genuine comfort. Then rest, he said. The house is here. I'm here. You don't have to be done. You just have to sleep. Rose closed her eyes. For the first time in 90 years, she let someone else carry the weight. Chapter 7. The Breaking of the Throne. The nursery was dark, lit only by softly glowing runes meant to soothe a sleeping child. Silk curtains hung from the walls. The crib itself was carved from dark wood, padded with cushions that had cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Syrien stood at its edge, watching, waiting. For 2 days since draining the trader of Ultranaceous' essence, she had kept her distance from the child. Not intentionally, but the grief, the rage, the overwhelming flood of having the voice back in her head had consumed everything else. But this morning something shifted. The child stirred. His eyes opened slowly. Dark eyes, sharp features, the unmistakable architecture of Ultranaceous' blood rendered small and innocent. His tiny hands flexed. His breathing changed from the deep unconsciousness of sleep to the confused wakefulness of a child waking for the first time. Syrien stepped closer to the crib, her breath held. Her son, finally awake. The boy's eyes found hers. And then, nothing. No recognition, no flicker of knowing, no instinctive reaching toward the face he should recognize as mother. Just a confused, unfocused gaze of an infant who'd woken in a strange place and didn't understand why. He began to cry. Not with the distress of a child, but with the absolute panic of an infant who'd been separated from something it needed. His tiny body arched in the crib, his small hands reaching blindly, searching for something that wasn't there. The cries were high-pitched, desperate, the sound of a helpless creature calling for comfort it didn't know how to name. Syrien reached for him. The moment her hands touched his small body, he screamed, not cried, screamed. A sound of pure terror, of a baby utterly lost and completely alone. He thrashed in her arms, his small fists pounding against her chest, his body rigid with panic. He didn't know her, didn't recognize her, saw only a stranger in the darkness. Syrien tried to soothe him. "It's all right, little king. It's Mommy. You're safe." But the words meant nothing to him, because his mind, his consciousness, was still that of a 6-month-old infant. His body had aged 5 years in ritual chambers, his physical form had been forced through impossible development. But his mind, the part that learned, that remembered, that recognized faces and voices and mother, had been left behind. It was still an infant's mind, trapped in a child's body, utterly bewildered and alone. Syrien held him as he screamed, and the sound was a knife to her chest. "What did they do to you?" she whispered. "What did they do?" The child didn't answer, couldn't answer, could only scream and scream and scream until his tiny voice grew hoarse, until he exhausted himself into a fitful, nightmare-filled sleep in her arms. Syrien stood there for hours. Just stood there, holding the broken thing they'd made of her son, feeling Ultranatius's presence in her head turn from rage into something darker, something that looked almost like understanding of what this failure meant. Finally, as the child slipped into troubled sleep, she carefully lowered him back into the crib. Her hands were shaking, her breath was coming in shallow gasps, and when she turned away from the nursery, her eyes were flat, completely empty of everything but determination and fury. She left the chamber without looking back. The main chamber of Umbral's fortress was vast, carved from living shadow and ancient stone. The priests were gathered there, 17 of them, their robes still stained with the blood and residue of the ritual they'd performed. They were weak, exhausted, their magical reserves completely depleted. Many were still unsteady on their feet, being supported by younger acolytes. They looked up when Syrien entered. The room went absolutely silent. She didn't speak, didn't announce herself, just walked through the chamber with Sorvin pacing beside her like a spectre made manifest. The spectre wolf's form flickered between solid and spectral, his eyes burning with reflected madness. She stopped directly in front of the high priest, an old man, skeletal. His robes hung on him like burial cloths. He'd served Ultranatius for decades. "High priest," Syrien said, her voice perfectly calm, almost conversational. "Explain to me what I just witnessed in the nursery." The old man's face went pale. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "My queen, the ritual, it was complex. The accelerated aging process." "His mind," Syrien cut him off. "The boy's mind is still an infant's. 6 months old at most. He doesn't recognize me. He doesn't understand language. He can't even hold himself upright. Explain." The high priest was trembling now. The ritual required extreme measures. The body had to age rapidly, but the consciousness was deemed unnecessary for initial. Syrian's hand moved like liquid death. She didn't draw a weapon. She just reached into his chest, not physically, but through the connection that bound her to Ultranatius's power. She pulled. His scream echoed through the chamber. His robes ignited from the inside out. Violet flames erupted from his mouth, his eyes burning from the inside as she literally extracted his life force. He tried to speak, tried to beg, but there was nothing left but ash and burning and the absolute certainty of his own erasure. In seconds, there was nothing left but a pile of grey powder that fell to the stone floor like winter snow. The priests froze. Syrien turned to the next one, a younger priest, maybe 40, who'd assisted in the ritual. "And you," she said, her voice dropping to something that sounded almost like a purr. "You held the knife that cut the binding runes into my son's flesh." "Yes?" The priest tried to run. Sorvin was there before he'd made 3 steps, the spectre wolf's jaws closing around the man's arm, not to kill, but to hold, to keep him in place for what came next. Syrien approached slowly, deliberately, letting him understand exactly what was about to happen. "I'm going to give you a choice," she said, almost gently. "You can tell me, right now, everything, and I mean everything, about the ritual, every step, every incantation, every binding, every single detail. Or I can let my wolf feast while you're still conscious enough to feel it." The priest was already screaming, already trying to tear his arm free from Sorvin's grip. The ritual was designed by the trader," he gasped. "He said the consciousness had to be held in stasis during the acceleration. He said it would integrate once the body finished developing. He said it would take time, but the child would recover his memories, his awareness." "He said," Syrien repeated quietly, "and you believed him." "Yes! Yes, we believed him! He had Ultranatius's knowledge. He said—" Syrien raised her hand, and the priest's body simply ceased. Not burned, not broken, just gone, ceased to exist in any meaningful way. His consciousness scattered like ash, his body collapsing like a puppet with cut strings. Sorvin released him. There was nothing left to hold. The remaining priests were now openly terrified. 13 of them, staring at the places where the high priest and the younger priest had stood moments before. Syrien turned to face them all, her eyes burning with violet light that came from deep inside her, from the presence that was both her and not her, simultaneously. "You failed," she said, her voice carrying layers, her own voice and Ultranatius's speaking through her like a duet of fury. "You were given one task. One. And you failed so completely that my son's consciousness is a helpless infant trapped in a growing body." She paused, letting them feel the weight of her rage. "But I'm not going to kill all of you. Not yet." The relief on their faces was almost comical. "You have 2 days," she continued, her voice dropping to something more dangerous than rage, something cold and certain. 2 days to rest, 2 days to recover your magical reserves, and then you're going to tell me exactly how to fix what you broke." A priest stepped forward, braver than the rest, or perhaps simply more foolish. "My queen, the ritual... We don't know if..." "I don't care what you know or don't know," Syrien said. "In 2 days, you're going to find a way. You're going to figure out how to restore his consciousness. You're going to reverse this process, or accelerate his mental development or something. Because if you don't..." She smiled, and it was the smile of something that had once been human, but had become something far more dangerous. "If you don't, I'm going to spend a month finding new and creative ways to teach you the meaning of failure. And unlike the trader, I won't be merciful enough to keep you dead." The priests said nothing. They understood perfectly what she meant. "Rest," Syrien said, turning away. "Recover. Prepare." She paused at the chamber's exit and looked back. "And pray that you find a solution. Because in 2 days, if my son's mind is still broken, every one of you is going to understand what it means to be the chosen sacrifice to a god who's angry enough to break the laws of reality itself." She left the chamber. Behind her, the priests stood in stunned silence, each one understanding that they had exactly 48 hours to perform a miracle, or face a death so terrible that the high priest's swift erasure would seem like a mercy. The next morning, Syrien paced the halls of Umbral's fortress like a caged predator. Her hands trembled with barely contained power. Violet flames danced between her fingers and died, danced and died, an unconscious manifestation of her internal chaos. The child was in the nursery, sleeping again, or maybe unconscious. She couldn't tell the difference anymore. Ultranacious's voice in her head wouldn't stop talking. The ritual was flawed, predictable. The trader was always going to fail. This is what happens when you trust those beneath you with matters of divine significance. "Shut up," Syrien snapped back, her own voice raw from lack of sleep. "This is your fault. You allowed this. You put the child there. I was bound in death. I could not prevent—" "Shut up!" She slammed her fist into a stone wall. The impact sent a crack spiderwebbing across 20 feet of fortress architecture. Dust rained down. Sorvin whined softly, pressing against her leg. He could feel her spiraling. Bonded to her, every moment of her psychological breakdown was happening inside his consciousness too. She knelt and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his spectral fur. "What do we do?" she whispered. "How do we fix this?" Sorvin had no answer. Later in the afternoon, she visited the child again. He was awake. But there was nothing in his eyes. Just the vacant stare of an infant trapped in confusion. When she approached the crib, he started to cry again, that panicked, desperate wailing of a 6-month-old who recognized nothing, understood nothing. She tried to comfort him, tried to sing to him, tried to introduce herself as his mother. Nothing worked. He didn't recognize her. Might never recognize her, if the ritual couldn't be reversed. She left the nursery before the crying drove her completely mad. That evening, the trader's chamber was dark, lit only by a single candle. The man himself lay on a stone slab, barely alive, his breathing shallow and laboured. His eyes were open but unseeing, vegetative, drained of everything that made him him. Syrien stood over him, staring at his broken body. She could have ended him, should have ended him. But she kept him alive. Why? Maybe because he deserved to understand his failure. Maybe because she wanted to make him watch what his solution had created. Maybe because the trader represented something, the last person who'd claimed to have answers and then catastrophically failed. She reached down and touched his forehead. He didn't react, couldn't react. "Do you understand yet?" she whispered. "Do you understand what you did?" The trader was incapable of understanding anything anymore. That night, the priests were working desperately in the ritual chamber. 17 of them, their hands trembling as they consulted ancient texts, arguing about theoretical reversals, frantically trying to find a solution to the impossible problem they'd created. They all knew what waited for them if they failed. Syrien could hear their panic from 3 chambers away, could taste it in the air, the desperation, the certainty of their doom. She moved through the fortress like a ghost, checking on them periodically, not speaking, just observing, reminding them that she was watching, that their time was running out. The priests worked faster, their voices growing more frantic. Late night. Ultranacious's presence had become almost tangible now. Not a separate entity, but a voice that overlapped with hers, speaking her thoughts before she could think them, suggesting solutions that made sense and no sense simultaneously. We should burn them all. Start fresh with new priests. No, Syrien countered. We need them to fix the child. The child is beyond fixing. The ritual damage... I said no. She was arguing with a voice inside her own head, having full conversations with herself. The line between what was Syrien and what was Ultranacious had become blurred. Sorvin followed her through the halls, matching her pacing, matching her breathing. When she spiraled, he spiraled. When she broke, pieces of him broke too. Their bond wasn't helping anymore. It was amplifying everything. Early morning. She hadn't slept. Neither had the priests. Neither had Sorvin. The fortress was humming with barely contained madness. The child was still an infant. The ritual still hadn't been reversed. And then, a messenger arrived at the gates. He was young, panicked, covered in soot and blood. His eyes were wild with the particular terror of someone who'd witnessed absolute catastrophe and had to deliver the news to someone far more dangerous than the catastrophe itself. He was brought to the main chamber by Black Dawn soldiers, his legs barely holding him up. Syrien was there, waiting. "My queen," the messenger said, his voice shaking so badly he could barely speak. "I bring urgent news from Umbral. The fortress, the training facility. There's been an attack." The chamber went absolutely silent. Syrien stepped forward slowly, deliberately, like a predator approaching wounded prey. "Explain," she said. "The fortress is burning. The training facility is destroyed. The entire eastern wing has collapsed. Soldiers are dead. The archive, everything is gone. It's a massacre." "Who?" Syrian's voice was perfectly calm, dangerously calm. "Who attacked?" The messenger opened his mouth, closed it. "There were 3 of them. Maybe 4. The reports are unclear," he gasped. "They came in from the east, through the maintenance passages. They knew the layout. They knew where the archive was kept." Syrian's jaw clenched. "Describe them." "One of them had a whip," the messenger said. "Fire magic. The armor was fire-kissed, enchanted. She moved like she'd done this 100 times before. She burned through our defenses like they were paper." Syrien went absolutely still. The fire-kissed armor, only Rose had those enchantments. The whip, only Rose wielded it that way. Which meant, if Rose was here, the pack was here. If the pack was here, Gunnar had sent them. Gunnar, alive, hunting. "Continue," she said, her voice dropping to something sharp as broken glass. "The second one carried a blade. Silver, rune-etched. The katana sang when it cut. When it touched our shadow-blessed steel, it shattered like glass. She moved with precision, tactical awareness, lethal efficiency. The pack. They were in her fortress. And the third?" Syrian's hands were trembling now. "Shadowborn. Umbranite darkness. We couldn't track him properly. He moved through the passages like he belonged there, like he knew the layout from memory." The pack. The pack had infiltrated her fortress. "They knew where the archive was?" Syrien asked, her voice rising slightly, losing its control. "Yes. They went directly there, bypassed every ward, every trap, every defense, like they had a map." Syrian's breath came sharp and fast. The pack didn't just attack random Black Dawn installations. The pack worked with Gunnar, which meant dash. "Is Gunnar alive?" The question tore from her throat. "Tell me." "Is Gunnar alive?" "We don't know, my queen. We haven't seen him. But if they're moving, if they're operating, they wouldn't move without him," Syrien finished, her mind spiraling through the implications. "He's alive. He has to be alive. He sent them. He's hunting me. She grabbed the messenger by the throat and lifted him off the ground. "Where did they go?" "After they looted the archive, where did they go?" "We don't know," the messenger choked. "They used a portal. They escaped through dimensional passage. We couldn't follow. We don't know where they went." Syrien threw him across the chamber. Syrian's scream wasn't human. It was the scream of someone whose world had just inverted completely. Not unknown enemy. Not mysterious attackers. The pack. Gunnar's pack. "Rose!" she screamed, her voice layered with her own rage and Ultranatius's fury. "Katrina!" "Shade!" She spun in circles, violet flames erupting from her body in uncontrolled waves. Sorvin's form shattered and reformed again and again, his spectral existence vibrating at frequencies that made stone crack. "I stabbed him," she whispered, her mind cycling through memories. Trinity fighting Katrina, Trinity fighting Rose, Trinity losing, always losing. I drove the dagger through his ribs. He collapsed. He was bleeding. He should have been dead. But he wasn't dead. He was alive. And he'd sent his pack to steal from her. How? She demanded of the empty air. How did he survive? The dagger was... the blade should have. Aeliana. The Guardian had saved him. Just like in Atherin. Just like she always did. She's protecting him, Syrien hissed. She's keeping him alive so he can hunt me. So he can... She stopped. Because if Gunnar was alive and hunting her, if he'd sent his pack to infiltrate Umbral, if they'd stolen the archive with its dimensional knowledge, that meant he knew where she was. That meant he could find her. That meant he was coming. The uncertainty crystallized into certainty, and the certainty was a knife to her chest. He's coming for me, she whispered. Gunnar is alive, and he's coming for me. She looked at the priests with eyes that had gone completely unhinged. The pack knows fire magic. The pack knows blade work. The pack knows shadow. They infiltrated my fortress in Umbral and escaped with dimensional knowledge. And if the pack is moving... She grabbed one of the priests by the collar. Well, Gunnar is directing them, which means he survived, which means Aeliana healed him, which means... Her voice cracked. Which means I failed. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She'd stabbed Gunnar. She'd had him dying at her feet. She should have won. But Aeliana saved him, and now he was hunting her. My child is broken, she said, her voice hollow. The trader is useless. My fortress was infiltrated by the pack, and Gunnar is alive. She looked down at her hands like they belonged to someone else. Gunnar is alive. The words felt like blasphemy, like a violation of the natural order. She'd been so certain he was dead. The trader had told her he was dead. The stabbing should have killed him, but nothing killed Gunnar. Nothing stopped him, and now he was coming for her. Sorvin whined, pressing against her. Through their bond, he could feel her psychological fracturing. Not just rage anymore, but genuine existential dread. The understanding that everything she'd planned, everything she'd counted on, was built on a false foundation. Gunnar wasn't dead. The pack was operational. Her fortress was compromised. Her son was broken, and she had no idea where they were or what they planned to do next. Find them, she commanded the priests, her voice dropping to something worse than rage, something cold and absolutely certain. I want to know where the pack went. I want to know where Gunnar is. I want to know... She stopped. Because she realized something worse. If the pack had escaped through a portal, that meant they were working with shadow mages, dimensional specialists, people who could hide in the spaces between realms, which meant Gunnar wasn't just hunting her. He was actively hunting her, not passively waiting for her to make a mistake, not sitting safely in some stronghold planning his next move. Actively hunting, right now. He's coming, she whispered. He's hunting me. He's looking for me right now. The fortress trembled with the force of her fear and fury mixing together into something that was no longer rage. It was panic, raw, primal, uncontrolled panic at the realization that the man she'd stabbed, the man she thought she'd killed, was alive and hunting her with the full resources of the pack at his back. Ultranacious's voice in her head was screaming incoherently now, no longer guidance but pure noise feeding her spiral. Find him, kill him, burn everything, destroy, survive. And Syrien, mad and fractured and absolutely terrified, could only pace like a caged animal and scream his name into the darkness. Gunnar, Gunnar, Gunnar! Over and over and over, until the fortress walls echoed with it, until Sorvin was howling in harmony with her screams, until the priests understood that their queen had finally, completely, utterly broken.